All right, fellow network defenders, listen closely. This is a Code Ninja security advisory. We are currently tracking a critical, unauthenticated, remote denial-of-service vulnerability, and it's actively threatening Apache HTTP Server deployments across the globe. Tracked as CVE-2026-3307, this exploit, it requires absolutely zero credentials, the complexity is basically nil, and it targets one of the most foundational pieces of web infrastructure on the planet. If you've got Apache servers running right now, you really need to pay attention to this explainer. Let's dive right into the intel payload so we can lock down your perimeter. So looking at the numbers, the official CVSS version 3.1 base score for this vulnerability sits at a 5.3. Now on paper, that classifies it as a moderate or medium severity threat. But as a white hat researcher, let me translate what that actually means for you on the ground. This score reflects an attack vector that's entirely network-based. It's got incredibly low attack complexity, requiring zero privileges and absolutely zero user interaction. The only reason it doesn't score higher is because, well, your confidentiality and integrity actually remain intact. But the availability impact, that's where the real damage is done. This exploit literally targets your uptime, giving attackers a free pass to continuously crash your worker processes.
Now check out this timeline. What's really fascinating here is the sheer velocity of the Coordinated Vulnerability Disclosure, or CVD. Transparency is absolutely the bedrock of our security community. Look at this. On the morning of May 4th, 2026, the Apache Software Foundation officially reported the vulnerability. Within literally 1 hour, CISA-ADP stepped in and assigned the official CVSS vector string. Fast forward just 3 days to May 7th, and security firms like SentinelOne were already publishing comprehensive threat analyses on the attack mechanics. And then by May 11th, major vendors like Red Hat were actively pushing out updated packages to their enterprise customers. This kind of rapid response is exactly how we measure industry benchmarks today.
So, what's the goal here? The primary objective of this disclosure and this explainer is straightforward. We want to force a vendor patch across your environments and ensure immediate defensive mitigation of your perimeter. Look, we don't analyze these 0 days just out of some academic curiosity, right? We do it to deploy actionable defenses before threat actors can fully automate their exploit chains against our infrastructure. Moving into Phase 2, Comms Check Protocol.
All right, before we transition into the technical deep dive, we need to execute a quick tactical pivot. As security professionals, we have to establish a vital communication link for real-time intelligence gathering. So to maintain operational readiness, I need you to execute this security comms link right now. First, subscribe to this channel and enable notifications. Seriously, frame this as a baseline security necessity so you get our real-time threat intelligence the exact second 0 days drop. Second, hit the like button on this alert to send a formal ACK and acknowledgement of receipt of this intel. We really need to verify this transmission is actually reaching the front lines.
And finally, let's execute a blast radius census. I need you to drop your current deployment status down in the comments below. Tell us, are you patched or are you vulnerable? Are you running the affected Apache modules, or is your architecture completely immune? This census really helps our community gauge the active blast radius of this vulnerability in the wild and better understand the broader threat landscape. Okay, into Phase 3. Defining the blast radius. Acknowledged. Now, to effectively defend a network, you first have to define exactly whose infrastructure is actually exposed to the threat. We need to define the blast radius of CVE 2026-33007. The absolutely crucial point here is isolating the vulnerable configurations, because this flaw doesn't just affect every Apache server right out of the box. Your deployment is actively affected if and only if you are operating Apache as a caching forward proxy and you have the mod_auth_socache module loaded and active. This is the module that caches authentication credentials. On the flip side, if you're operating a standard reverse proxy or just serving content as a standard origin server without that specific module loaded, well, you fall on the safe side. You're secure.
But if you are utilizing that proxy module, the ecosystem exposure is pretty vast. The vulnerable codebase spans the Apache HTTP Server 2.4x branch. We're talking from version 2.4.0 all the way up to 2.4.66. Major Linux distributions are actively tracking their exposure right now. Debian has already confirmed vulnerable source packages across their Bullseye, Bookworm, Trixie, and Forky releases. And Red Hat, they've flagged their enterprise environments, confirming that Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 6 through 10, along with Red Hat JBoss core services, actively contain the affected components.
You know, to truly neutralize an adversary, you really have to understand the weapon they wield. The root cause of this vulnerability is what's known as a CWE-476, basically a null pointer dereference. Deep within the mod authn socache request processing code, there's a missing validation step. It's like a missing checkpoint. When a specific request hits the proxy, the code attempts to dereference a memory pointer. It completely expects that pointer to hold a valid memory address containing an object, but instead, the pointer is uninitialized. It's null. So when the application tries to read from a null memory address, the operating system basically steps in and throws a segmentation fault, instantly killing the process. Boom!
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the dark elegance of this exploit chain. Think about it. The attacker requires absolutely zero authentication, no user interaction, and zero elevated privileges. By simply having network access to your caching forward proxy, they can just fire off crafted HTTP requests that trigger that exact vulnerable code path. Because each successful malicious request triggers a segmentation fault, the specific child process handling that connection just crashes and burns. The main parent process survives, sure, but it is constantly forced to spawn replacement worker processes. So repeated requests from an attacker amplify this effect, creating a cascading failure that throttles your CPU, chokes your memory, and just completely degrades service availability for your legitimate users.
All right, moving to Phase 3.5, the mitigation protocol.
We've identified the threat, and we understand the mechanics. Now, we shift into action mode. It is time to deploy the exact remediation protocol that network defenders need to execute to close this attack vector immediately. Here is your strict, actionable mitigation sequence. Priority 1. Upgrade your Apache HTTP Server infrastructure to version 2.4067 right now. This release contains the definitive code fix straight from the Apache Software Foundation. Priority 2. If an immediate binary upgrade is blocked by change control or whatever red tape, you absolutely must disable the mod_authn_socache module entirely. Priority 3. Shield your affected servers behind a hardened upstream proxy or deploy a web application firewall configured to filter out those anomalous, malformed requests targeting your proxy endpoints.
Let's be realistic, though. We all know that in enterprise environments, immediate patching is sometimes literally impossible. But business continuity still has to be maintained. So here is your emergency configuration workaround. Get into your HTTPD configuration files and explicitly comment out the following directive: load module authn_socache_module. Then, just restart your Apache service. By disabling this module, you are removing the vulnerable code path entirely. Now, yes, you will lose the authentication caching functionality, that's the trade-off, but you will effectively immunize your perimeter against the denial of service condition until you can get version 2.4.67 fully deployed.
Now, if you are running a vulnerable configuration right now, you need to know if you are actively taking fire. It's time to go hunting for indicators of compromise. You need to monitor your Apache error logs aggressively. What you're looking for are repeated segmentation faults, specifically syntax that reads child ped xxx exit signal segmentation fault 11. Cross-reference this with your process accounting data. Are you seeing massive, unnatural spikes in worker process churn? Finally, correlate those crashes with your HTTP access logs. You want to flag any anomalous bursts of unauthenticated requests hitting your forward proxy from single sources.
Bringing us to Phase 4, Ethics and Sign-Off.
As we start to wrap up this advisory, I want to talk for a second about why rapid vulnerability analysis truly matters. The rationale behind coordinated vulnerability disclosure is incredibly simple. Users need to know to protect their systems. Keeping these things hidden in the dark, it just doesn't work anymore. By transparently defining the blast radius, explaining the nitty-gritty of the null pointer dereference mechanics, and providing an immediate workaround, we are actually empowering network defenders to beat the automated exploit scanners. Information sharing is, without a doubt, our very best defensive tool. So I want to leave you with this to consider regarding your broader network hygiene. We spend millions of dollars on next-generation firewalls and AI-driven threat hunting, right? Yet, a completely unauthenticated attacker can degrade a major enterprise perimeter simply because a single C pointer wasn't initialized properly in a caching module. Think about that for a second. Is your perimeter truly as resilient as your fancy dashboards claim it is? Or are you just one unvalidated memory address away from a total cascading failure? Take this as a sign to re-examine your configurations. Disable the modules you don't explicitly need. Reduce that attack surface. Go patch your systems, monitor those logs aggressively, and as always, stay secure.